After saving an elder, a veteran and his dog were given a cafe with a hidden past. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Jack, a former Army combat engineer, had seen his fair share of chaos. The war had left him with more than scars. It had stolen the peace he so desperately needed. He wandered the country now, aimlessly drifting from town to town, hoping for a new start. But one chilly autumn afternoon, in a small, nearly forgotten town in the northeast, Jack's life would take a turn he never saw coming. The streets were empty as Jack and his loyal German shepherd, Max, walked down the quiet main road. The wind carried the scent of wet leaves and the promise of an early winter. It had been weeks since Jack had found a place to settle. His old army jacket, now frayed at the edges, was a constant reminder of the battles he had fought, both on and off the field. Max trotted beside him, his amber eyes alert, sensing something ahead. They had just crossed the narrow bridge over a winding creek when Jack heard a faint cry for help. It was weak, almost drowned by the howling wind. Jack's instincts kicked in. Without hesitation, he motioned for Max to follow and rushed toward the source of the sound. As they turned the corner, Jack saw her, an elderly woman struggling to keep her balance, one hand gripping the railing of the porch of a small cafe. The storm had ripped through the town earlier, and now the weight of a fallen pine tree pinned her to the ground. Max barked, his deep, resonant voice cutting through the wind, alerting Jack to the danger. Jack reached her in a matter of seconds. His heart raced as he carefully assessed the situation. The old woman's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, but she was still breathing. Jack didn't waste a moment. He kneeled down, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "You're going to be okay," he reassured her, though his own voice trembled. With a grunt, he lifted the heavy beam off her, using every ounce of strength his military training had left him. Max circled them, his watchful eyes never leaving the scene. After what felt like an eternity, the woman was free. She stumbled to her feet, gasping for air, but the look of gratitude in her eyes was enough to calm Jack's racing heart. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice fragile. "I thought I was done for." Jack nodded, helping her into the warmth of her cafe. "It's nothing," he replied, though inside, he felt something stirring. He had saved her, but this time, he didn't feel like a soldier. He felt like a man who had done something good for someone else for the first time in years. As they sat in the cozy cafe, sipping warm tea, the woman introduced herself as Mabel. She had owned this cafe for over 40 years, a small but beloved spot in the town where locals gathered for coffee and conversation. She told Jack stories of her late husband, who had built the cafe from the ground up, and how they had worked together to turn it into a community hub. But over the years, the cafe had fallen into decline. Mabel had grown old, and the storm had taken its toll on the building. Jack listened intently, his eyes drifting to the old photographs on the wall. There was something about this place, something that tugged at him. Mabel's voice softened as she spoke of the cafe's past, and Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of mystery surrounding the old place. He didn't know why, but he was certain that this cafe held more than just memories. It held a secret, one that had yet to be uncovered. Jack sat in the corner of Mabel's cozy cafe, the warmth of the room a stark contrast to the biting wind outside. The small fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls filled with faded photographs of the town and its people. Max lay at Jack's feet, his head resting on his paws, while Mabel sat across from him, sipping her tea. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and baked bread, a comfort in the midst of the storm. Jack's mind wandered, as Mabel continued to tell her stories of the cafe's past. But there was something she hadn't said, something in the way she spoke that made Jack feel there was more to this place than met the eye. As Mabel spoke of her late husband, Jack couldn't help but notice the glint of pride and sadness in her eyes. She talked about how they had worked tirelessly to build the cafe together, how it had once been the heart of the community. It had been a place where people came together, where memories were made over coffee and pie, and where friendships were forged. But all of that changed when her husband passed away. The cafe, once bustling with life, had slowly withered away, left to sit in the shadows of a time long gone. Mabel's voice trembled slightly as she mentioned how the storm had damaged the roof, and how she was struggling to keep the business afloat. Jack felt a pang of sympathy. He had seen the toll that time and hardship could take on a person, and Mabel was no exception. But what struck him most was the sense of loss that lingered in her words. It wasn't just the cafe that had been lost. It was a piece of her soul. As the afternoon passed, Jack offered to help with the repairs. He wasn't sure what it was, but there was something about Mabel's story that called to him. Maybe it was the way she had welcomed him into her world so freely, or maybe it was the feeling that he had found a place where he could finally do something meaningful. Mabel accepted with gratitude, her tired eyes lighting up at the prospect of help. "Thank you, Jack," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "I don't know what I would do without this place. It's all I have left of him." Jack nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The cafe wasn't just a business. It was a memory, a symbol of a life once lived, and a legacy that Mabel was desperately trying to hold on to. Over the next few days, Jack and Max worked tirelessly alongside Mabel. They patched up the roof, replaced the broken windows, and cleaned out the clutter that had accumulated over the years. Each time Jack stepped inside, he felt the history of the place wrapping around him, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to change. As they worked, Jack grew more and more attached to the cafe, to Mabel, and to the sense of purpose that had been absent from his life for so long. It was as if, with every nail hammered and every piece of wood replaced, he was repairing not just the building, but something inside himself. One afternoon, as Jack was up on the roof securing a few loose shingles, Max let out a sharp bark from below. Jack looked down, startled, and saw Max staring intently at the ground. "What is it, boy?" Jack called down. Max's tail was stiff, his eyes wide. He barked again, then trotted over to the side of the cafe. Jack climbed down quickly, his curiosity piqued. As he reached the ground, Max led him to a corner of the cafe's yard, where the ground was slightly raised. Max sniffed around the area, his paws digging into the soft earth. Jack knelt down beside him, his fingers brushing the ground. It was then that he noticed something unusual, an old metal handle sticking out of the dirt. He brushed the dirt away carefully, revealing a small, rusted trapdoor. Jack's heart skipped a beat. "What is this?" he murmured. Mabel appeared at the door, her expression puzzled. "What have you found?" she asked. Jack stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I'm not sure, but I think this might be more than just a storage shed." He pulled the handle, and with a creak, the trapdoor opened. Beneath it was a narrow, stone staircase that descended into the darkness. "It's a cellar," Mabel said, her voice filled with disbelief. "But why would it be hidden?" Jack's mind raced. There was something about this discovery that felt important. It wasn't just a storage space. It was a hidden part of the cafe's past, one that had been deliberately concealed. He could feel the weight of the mystery pressing down on him. Something told him that whatever was hidden down there would change everything. Jack turned to Mabel, his eyes filled with curiosity. "Are you sure you've never seen this before?" Mabel shook her head. "I had no idea. My husband never mentioned it." Jack looked back at the darkened staircase. The secret beneath the cafe was waiting to be uncovered, and he had a feeling that, once they stepped inside, their lives, and the cafe's future, would never be the same. As Jack and Mabel stood at the entrance to the hidden cellar, a mixture of uncertainty and excitement filled the air. The trapdoor creaked ominously as the dim light from the cafe's windows barely reached the staircase leading into the shadows below. Jack felt the weight of the moment, as though he was about to unlock a secret that had been buried for far too long. Max stood at his side, his nose twitching as if he too could sense the significance of what lay ahead. Mabel, though hesitant, was equally drawn to the mystery. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. "I never knew this was here. My husband, he always had his secrets." Jack glanced at her, his face softening with understanding. "Sometimes, the past has a way of hiding things from us. But maybe it's time we found out what's been kept in the dark." With that, he took a step forward, pulling out his flashlight and shining it down the narrow stairway. The light flickered for a moment before settling, revealing the stone steps that seemed to descend forever into the earth below. Mabel hesitated for a moment, but then, driven by curiosity, followed Jack down into the dark. The air grew cooler with each step, the faint scent of earth and old wood mixing with the lingering aroma of the cafe upstairs. The staircase led to a small, dimly lit chamber that felt as though it had been untouched for decades. Dust hung thick in the air, and the silence was so complete that it seemed to swallow the sound of their footsteps. Jack moved cautiously, his flashlight illuminating the room. There were shelves lined with jars of what appeared to be old preserves, boxes of forgotten papers, and a collection of strange, weathered tools. But what caught his attention was a large wooden chest sitting in the far corner. It was old, its surface worn and scratched, and it looked as though it had been here for a lifetime. Mabel walked closer to the chest, her hand shaking slightly as she reached out to touch it. This was my husband's, she said softly. He was always a collector, but I never knew about this. Jack knelt beside her, his curiosity piqued. He could see that Mabel was both excited and apprehensive, as though unlocking this chest would open more than just its contents. With a deep breath, Jack stood and gently lifted the heavy lid. The sound of creaking wood echoed through the chamber as he peered inside. At first, all he could see were old papers and faded photographs, but as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he noticed something far more intriguing. A thick leather-bound book, its cover embossed with intricate patterns that seemed almost otherworldly. Jack reached in and carefully lifted the book from the chest, dusting off its cover. The pages were yellowed with age, and the spine creaked as he opened it. As he flipped through the pages, he began to realize that this was no ordinary book. It was a journal, one that chronicled not just the history of the cafe, but of Mabel's husband, a man who had once been deeply involved in a network of people who had helped others in secret, providing shelter, food, and resources to those in need during times of hardship. "This is incredible," Jack muttered, scanning the pages. "Your husband wasn't just a businessman. He was part of something much bigger." Mabel took the journal from him, her fingers trembling as she traced the faded writing. "He never told me about this. I never knew he had been involved in such things. He always kept it hidden." Jack watched her closely. "Maybe he was protecting you from a past that was dangerous. This is bigger than we thought." As Mabel flipped through the journal, Jack's mind raced. The more he read, the more he understood that this cafe, this place Mabel had worked so hard to keep alive, was part of a much larger story. The journal spoke of secret meetings, coded messages, and an underground network that had provided aid to countless people in need. But it wasn't just about charity. There were mentions of a mysterious group, one that operated in the shadows, helping those who needed it most, but also working to uncover hidden treasures and long-lost legacies that had been buried by time. Jack stood up, his heart pounding. "We need to find out more. This cafe is more than just a business. It's a key to something that could change everything." Mabel looked up at him, her eyes wide with realization. "Do you think it's possible?" Jack nodded, his gaze fixed on the journal in her hands. "If there's one thing I've learned in my time as a soldier, it's that nothing stays hidden forever. And now, it looks like we've uncovered something that could reveal the truth about this cafe and about your husband's legacy." The room felt heavy with the weight of their discovery. As Jack and Mabel stood in the cellar, the journal between them, they knew that what they had found was just the beginning. There was more to this story, much more, and it was waiting to be uncovered. Little did they know, the secrets of the past were about to collide with the present in ways they never imagined. The cellar was silent as Jack and Mabel stood there, the weight of their discovery hanging between them. The journal in Mabel's hands seemed to pulse with an energy of its own, its pages heavy with secrets that had been hidden for so long. Max, who had been quietly watching them, let out a soft whine as if sensing the tension in the air. Jack took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Mabel, we need to take this to the next step. We can't just stop here. This could change everything." Mabel nodded, her face a mixture of disbelief and awe. "But where do we start? We don't even know who these people are or what they wanted with the cafe." Jack looked at the journal again, his mind racing. "It's clear your husband was part of something much bigger than we realized. A network, a group, maybe even a movement. But what's really important right now is the legacy he left behind. The cafe was just a front, a cover for something far more valuable." Mabel looked at him, her brow furrowed. "But what does that mean? What did they want with all this?" Jack took a step toward her. "I don't know yet, but the answer is in the journal. Your husband wrote about secret meetings, hidden locations, and coded messages. I'm sure that wherever this group is now, they're still watching. We just need to figure out what they left behind. The idea of digging deeper into her husband's past was unsettling to Mabel. He had always been the quiet one, the one who kept to himself. She had never suspected he had been involved in anything so mysterious. But now, the pieces were beginning to fall into place. We'll need to look at everything, Jack said. Every page of the journal, every note he left. There's something in there that'll tell us where to go next. They spent hours going through the journal, taking notes, and retracing the paths her husband had walked. Each entry revealed more about the underground network of people he had worked with, helping those in need, but also keeping something hidden in plain sight. There were mentions of a map that had once been tucked away in a hidden drawer behind the cafe's bar. Mabel's heart skipped a beat. The drawer, she whispered, her voice trembling. He told me about it once. I never thought it was important. Jack stood up, excitement in his eyes. That's it. The map we need is right here, in the cafe. Mabel nodded, though doubt still lingered in her mind. But if this map leads to something valuable, we could be in danger. What if someone's been watching us this whole time? Jack met her gaze with a determined look. If someone is watching, they're too late. We've already found the first clue. We'll find the rest. They went upstairs to the bar area, the heart of the cafe. The warm lights cast a welcoming glow on the wooden tables. But Mabel's eyes kept darting to the spot where her husband had spent countless hours working behind the counter. She reached behind the bar and began moving items, each moment heavier than the last. There, hidden behind a stack of old napkins, was a small wooden drawer. With trembling hands, she pulled it open, revealing a worn, leather-bound envelope tucked inside. Jack looked over her shoulder as she carefully unfolded the paper inside. It was an old map, faded and yellowed with age, but unmistakably clear. Lines marked with X's and cryptic notes were written across the map, detailing locations around the town and the surrounding areas. Mabel's hand trembled as she traced one of the X's. This place, it's near the old mill, she said softly. I remember my husband talking about it. He always said there was something special about that spot, but I never understood why. Jack's heart raced. This was it, the key to everything. The old mill had always been a place shrouded in mystery. No one ever went there anymore, and for good reason. But now, with the map in hand, Jack knew it was time to uncover the truth. We're going to find out what your husband was hiding, Jack said firmly. Mabel looked at him, a mix of fear and determination in her eyes. I never wanted to know what he was involved in. But now, it seems like it's the only way to truly understand him. And maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to save this place. Jack nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. It wasn't just about the cafe anymore. It was about uncovering the truth, about the legacy Mabel's husband had left behind, and about finding the answers to questions that had been buried for far too long. The next morning, Jack and Mabel set out for the old mill, the map guiding them through the overgrown paths that had once been well-traveled. Max led the way, his keen senses alert to every sound. The wind was still, the air thick with anticipation. As they reached the edge of the mill, Jack felt the weight of the moment. Whatever they were about to find would change everything. They stepped into the shadows of the mill, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the emptiness. And as they ventured deeper into the building, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. But he wasn't about to turn back now. They were too close. With one final push, they opened the door to what had been hidden for decades, ready to face whatever waited on the other side. The old mill stood in front of them, its once grand structure now crumbling and overtaken by nature. Vines crawled up its weathered walls, and the roof was missing in several places, exposing the remnants of what had once been a bustling place of industry. Jack, Mabel, and Max stood at the threshold, staring at the decaying building, their breath visible in the cool morning air. The map had led them here, to the heart of the mystery, but the mill seemed more like a forgotten relic than a place of significance. This is it, Jack muttered, his voice low and filled with determination. This is where it all comes together. Mabel nodded but seemed unsure. I never thought my husband would have anything to do with a place like this, she said softly, her eyes scanning the dilapidated building. Why? Here. Jack glanced at her, his expression serious. The map leads us here for a reason. Your husband was part of something bigger, something that used this mill for a purpose we still don't fully understand. But we will. He paused for a moment, then added, Let's see what's inside. With a deep breath, Jack stepped forward, pushing open the door with a creak. The interior of the mill was darker than the outside, and the air was thick with the smell of damp wood and rust. Max led the way, his senses heightened, tail straight and alert. Jack followed closely behind, Mabel trailing just a step behind. As they walked deeper into the mill, Jack could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. This place had seen years of activity, but now it was silent, as if holding its breath, waiting for something. "Look at this," Mabel said, pointing to a large stack of old crates against the far wall. The crates were covered in dust, and a few had been broken open, revealing a jumble of old papers and other forgotten items. Jack moved closer, brushing his hand over the rough surface of one of the crates. His eyes narrowed as he noticed something strange. These crates weren't just left behind. They were deliberately hidden. He knelt down, pushing aside the broken pieces of wood, and revealed a small, locked chest. The chest was old, its surface worn and chipped, but the lock was intact, rusted but still functional. Mabel crouched down next to him, her eyes widening. "What is that?" "It looks like something my husband would have kept." Jack nodded, his thoughts racing. This could be it, the last piece of the puzzle. Whatever your husband was protecting, it's in here. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small tool he always carried with him. He worked quickly, his hands steady, until he heard the soft click of the lock. Mabel's breath caught as Jack slowly lifted the chest's lid. Inside, there were no treasures or valuables, no gold or jewels, but instead, a thick folder filled with papers. Jack carefully pulled the folder out and opened it. As he flipped through the pages, his eyes widened. The documents were old, faded, but unmistakably important. There were more maps, similar to the one they had found in the cafe, but these were more detailed, marking locations far beyond the town. There were also names of people Jack had never heard of, some crossed out, others circled in red ink. "This isn't just a network of people. It's a network of places," Jack said, his voice low as he flipped through the pages. "These locations, they're linked. Some of them go back decades." Mabel looked over his shoulder, her hands trembling as she read the papers. "These are places where my husband must have hidden things he didn't want anyone to find." Jack nodded. "Exactly. Your husband was part of something far bigger than we thought. A group that's been operating in secret for years, hiding things that shouldn't be found." He paused, scanning one of the pages. "These names, they're not just people. They're the key to everything." As Jack examined the papers, his mind raced. They were standing in the heart of a mystery, but now they had the tools to solve it. The chest had held the final clue, but the journey was far from over. Mabel's voice broke through his thoughts. "What do we do now? What happens next?" Jack looked up, meeting her eyes. "We follow the trail. We go to the places on these maps, find the people, and uncover what your husband was hiding. This isn't just about the cafe anymore. It's about a legacy, about finding the truth." Mabel nodded slowly, her resolve strengthening. "I don't know what I'm about to get into, but I know one thing for sure. I'm in this with you." Jack gave her a small smile. "We're in this together." With the chest in hand and the weight of the past bearing down on them, they made their way out of the mill. The air outside felt different, charged with the energy of the mystery they were about to unravel. Jack knew that whatever they were about to discover, it would change everything. The past had been hidden for too long, but now, with the first clues in hand, they were ready to uncover the truth, no matter where it took them. As Jack and Mabel walked away from the old mill, the weight of their discovery settled heavily on their shoulders. The folder, now safely tucked under Jack's arm, felt like the key to unlocking everything they had been working toward. But with every answer they found, more questions seemed to arise. The air was still and cold, the afternoon light beginning to fade as they made their way back to the cafe. Max trotted at their side, his eyes still vigilant, ever watchful. Jack knew they were getting closer to the truth, but a sense of unease lingered. "What do you think all of this means?" Mabel asked, her voice breaking the silence between them. Jack glanced over at her, his mind still processing the details in the folder. "It means your husband was involved in something much larger than we ever imagined. These maps, the names, they all point to locations and people that have been working in the shadows for years. And now, we're part of it." Mabel looked down at her hands, her fingers trembling as she processed the gravity of his words. I never imagined any of this. My husband. He was so quiet, so private. It's hard to believe he was part of something like this. Jack placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Sometimes, the people we think we know best have secrets. But those secrets are often for a reason. And now, it's up to us to uncover what those reasons were. They arrived back at the cafe just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the old building. Mabel unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar smell of coffee and baked goods welcoming them. It was hard to imagine that just hours ago, they had been standing in the ruins of the mill, unearthing a past that neither of them was ready to confront. Jack set the folder down on the counter and sat across from Mabel. We need to go through this carefully, he said, his voice steady. Every name, every location, it all means something. And we have to figure out what it is. Mabel nodded, her face serious. I don't even know where to begin. Jack opened the folder and spread the pages out in front of them. Let's start with what we know. These locations, the ones marked on the map, are tied to something. They're connected to the people in this journal. Mabel leaned in, her eyes scanning the papers. This one, she said, pointing to a location near the outskirts of town. It's a small cabin up in the hills. I've heard of it before, but no one ever goes there. Jack frowned. Why? Not. Mabel hesitated. It's been abandoned for years, and people say it's cursed. It's always been off limits. But this map shows it clearly, as if it's a place your husband thought was important. Jack stood up, his determination growing. Then that's where we'll go. We'll start there and see what we find. The next morning, Jack, Mabel, and Max set out for the cabin. The sky was overcast, and the wind had a sharp bite to it, as if nature itself was warning them. They drove for miles, the old road leading them further away from the town, through dense forest and winding hills. Mabel was quiet, lost in thought, while Jack's mind raced. The closer they got, the more he felt a sense of foreboding. Finally, they reached the end of the road. The cabin stood at the edge of a clearing, its wooden structure barely visible through the overgrown trees. Jack parked the truck and turned to Mabel. This is it, he said, his voice low. Mabel nodded, her hand resting on the door handle. I never thought I'd come back here, she whispered. Together, they walked toward the cabin, Max leading the way. The air grew colder as they stepped onto the porch, the floor creaking beneath their feet. Jack tried the door, and to his surprise, it opened with a soft groan. Inside, the cabin was dark and musty, the furniture covered in layers of dust. But there was something about it that felt different, as if the place was holding its breath, waiting for someone to uncover its secrets. Jack turned on his flashlight and began to explore. Max sniffed around the room, his tail wagging slowly as he circled the cabin. Jack moved toward the back of the room, where a large wooden chest sat against the wall. It was old, covered in cobwebs, and looked as though it hadn't been touched in years. He knelt down and opened it. Inside, there was a collection of old books, papers, and small objects. But what caught his eye was a small, leather-bound journal, nearly identical to the one they had found in the cafe. Jack's heart skipped a beat. Mabel, look at this. Mabel walked over and peered into the chest. It's the same as the one in the cafe, she said, her voice trembling. Do you think it's another one of his journals? Jack nodded. I think it is. He picked it up carefully, feeling the weight of it in his hands. As he flipped through the pages, he found more maps, more names, and more cryptic notes. But one page stood out, an entry written in Mabel's husband's familiar handwriting. This is it, Jack said, his voice tight with excitement. Your husband was keeping track of everything, and I think we're finally starting to understand what he was involved in. Mabel took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the page. What does it mean? Jack's voice was filled with resolve. It means we're closer to the truth than we've ever been. And whatever it is, we have to keep going. We're almost there. As Jack and Mabel stood in the cabin, the weight of the discovery hung heavy between them. The road ahead was unclear, but they both knew one thing for certain. The past had finally come alive, and its secrets were waiting to be uncovered. Jack and Mabel stood in the dim light of the cabin, the journal still open in Jack's hands. They had uncovered more than they could have ever imagined. And yet, the full picture was still hidden, pieces scattered across locations they had yet to visit. The road they were on had become more than just about uncovering her husband's past. It was now about discovering a legacy that had been protected for decades. This journal, Jack said, glancing at Mabel, it's not just about finding treasures. It's about a network, a group that's been working in the shadows, helping people, hiding secrets. And your husband, he was at the center of it all. Mabel, still processing everything, nodded slowly. But why? Why keep all of this a secret? If he was trying to protect people, why not tell me? Jack closed the journal, his fingers lingering on the cover. Sometimes people keep secrets because they think it's the only way to protect the ones they love. Your husband was part of something bigger, something dangerous. And maybe he wanted to protect you from that. He didn't want you to carry the weight of this. Mabel's eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding. She had always known her husband had a mysterious side, but this was something entirely different. She had thought the quiet years after his passing were filled with peace, but now it was clear that the storm was only beginning to show its true force. So what do we do now? Mabel asked, her voice steady but unsure. Jack stood up, his mind already mapping out their next steps. We follow the trail. The journal mentions several locations. The people your husband worked with, they're all still out there, waiting for someone to find them. We need to start connecting the dots. He took a deep breath. We're not just uncovering secrets. We're finishing something your husband started. And we can't stop until we know the full truth. Mabel looked around the cabin, taking in the silence that now felt heavier than before. Where do we start? She asked. Jack turned and pointed to a spot on the map inside the journal. There's a farm outside of town. It's marked with a symbol I've seen in a few of the other notes, an old barn, isolated from the rest of the community. I think it's one of the places your husband worked with. If we go there, we might find someone who knows more about this network, about the people your husband was involved with. Without another word, Jack and Mabel packed up their things and headed out. Max, as always, was by their side, his instincts sharp and ready. The drive to the farm took them through winding roads and thick trees, the sky now overcast with clouds that threatened rain. As they neared the barn, the landscape became more isolated, the houses fewer and farther between. The road turned rougher, and Jack's truck bounced over the uneven terrain. The air felt dense, almost as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. They finally reached the barn, an old, wooden structure that looked as if it hadn't been touched in years. It stood on a small hill, surrounded by tall grasses and the faint outline of what used to be fields. Jack parked the truck at the base of the hill, and they got out, walking toward the barn. Max's ears were perked, his eyes scanning the surroundings as he led the way. The barn doors were slightly ajar, and as they pushed them open, the scent of old hay and dust filled the air. The inside was empty, save for a few rusted farming tools and scattered hay bales. But there was something strange about the barn. It didn't feel abandoned. The atmosphere was thick with the feeling of something just out of reach, something that had been hidden away. It's too quiet, Mabel whispered. Jack nodded, his senses on high alert. Stay close, he said quietly. They walked deeper into the barn, Jack's flashlight illuminating the shadows. As they reached the far end of the barn, Jack spotted something unusual, a trapdoor in the corner, half hidden beneath a stack of old crates. This is it, Jack murmured, moving toward the door. With one swift motion, he cleared the crates and pulled open the trapdoor. Beneath it was a staircase leading down into the darkness. Max growled low, but Jack was already descending, his steps cautious but determined. Mabel followed closely behind, her heart pounding in her chest. They reached the bottom of the stairs, where the air grew colder, and the sound of their footsteps echoed off the stone walls. The small room at the bottom was dimly lit, but Jack could see a few old filing cabinets and shelves filled with boxes. The faint smell of paper and mildew hung in the air. Jack moved forward, his flashlight scanning the room. This must be a storage room, Mabel said, her voice barely a whisper. Jack nodded, but his eyes were fixed on something in the far corner of the room. There, tucked away behind a large crate, was another chest, this one more ornate than the last, its surface carved with intricate designs. Jack approached it slowly, his heart racing. He had a feeling that this chest held the final piece of the puzzle. Mabel stood back as Jack knelt in front of it, examining the lock. It was old, but not beyond repair. With a little effort, Jack managed to open it, revealing the contents inside. It was a collection of documents, blueprints, maps, and photographs, each one telling a piece of the story. But what caught Jack's eye was the final photograph. It was a picture of a building, an old mansion tucked away in the hills. The handwriting on the back read, "The final location, where it all began." Jack looked up at Mabel, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We're going there. This is where the story ends. The mansion holds the key to everything." Mabel nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then let's go find it. Whatever it is, we're ready." Jack smiled, knowing that this was it, the last step. The road had been long, and the secrets had been buried deep, but they were finally on the verge of uncovering the truth. The mansion awaited, and Jack knew that once they arrived, everything would change. The mansion loomed in the distance, its silhouette dark against the setting sun. Jack and Mabel had driven for hours, following the cryptic map that had led them to this final destination. The road had narrowed as they neared the mansion, the trees closing in around them like silent sentinels, guarding the secrets that lay within. Max, ever the vigilant companion, sat quietly in the back seat, his eyes scanning the landscape. The closer they got, the more the air seemed to thrum with an electric tension, as if the mansion itself was holding its breath, waiting for their arrival. Jack's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "This is it," he said, his voice a mix of anticipation and caution. "We're about to find out everything." Mabel's heart raced in her chest. She had no idea what to expect, but she felt the weight of her husband's hidden past pressing down on her. "Do you think we're ready for this?" she asked softly. Jack nodded, his eyes focused on the winding road ahead. "We don't have a choice. We've come this far." The mansion finally came into full view, towering over the surrounding land. Its once grand structure had fallen into disrepair. Broken windows, cracked stone walls, and an overgrown garden gave the place an air of abandonment. Yet, there was something undeniably imposing about it, something that made it clear this was no ordinary building. It had been built to stand the test of time, to guard the secrets buried within. Jack parked the truck in front of the mansion, and they both stepped out into the cold evening air. Max hopped out after them, his body low, his senses alert. The mansion seemed almost alive, as if it were watching them, waiting for them to make the next move. "This place gives me the creeps," Mabel said, her voice tinged with unease. "It's like it doesn't want us here." Jack turned to her, his expression serious. "That's exactly why we need to be here. Whatever your husband was hiding, it's in there." They walked toward the front door, the gravel crunching beneath their feet. The massive wooden door creaked as Jack pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit foyer. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of dust and decay. It felt like they had stepped back in time, into a place that had been frozen in memory. The grand chandelier above them was covered in cobwebs, its once glittering crystals now dull and lifeless. Mabel hesitated in the doorway, her hand lingering on the frame. "Do you think he wanted me to find this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack looked at her, his gaze softening. "I think he left it for you, for both of us. He knew you would need to know the truth, even if it was something you didn't want to find." Mabel took a deep breath and stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath her weight. Jack followed closely behind, his eyes scanning the room. The mansion was large, its walls adorned with faded portraits and old tapestries. As they moved further into the hallway, they could hear the sound of wind whistling through the broken windows, a mournful cry that seemed to echo through the halls. "Where do we start?" Mabel asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jack glanced at the floor plans in the journal, his finger tracing a line that led to a door at the end of the hall. "That's where we need to go." They made their way down the hallway, Max leading the way, his nose twitching with each step. The door at the end of the hall was heavy, its wood carved with intricate designs that matched those on the chest they had found at the mill. Jack pushed the door open, revealing a hidden study, its walls lined with shelves filled with books and old papers. A large desk sat in the center of the room, covered in stacks of documents. Jack moved toward the desk, his heart pounding with anticipation. "This is it," he muttered to himself. "This is where it all comes together." Mabel stood in the doorway, her eyes scanning the room. "What are we looking for?" Jack didn't answer immediately. He walked over to the desk and began rifling through the papers, his hands moving quickly as he searched for anything that might reveal the truth. After a few moments, his eyes landed on something. A folder, old and worn, its edges frayed. He opened it carefully, and inside, he found a series of blueprints and notes. "These are the plans," Jack said, his voice filled with awe. "The plans for the network your husband was part of. He was building something big." Mabel stepped forward, her breath catching in her throat. "What is it? What was he building?" Jack's eyes scanned the documents. "A sanctuary. A place to protect the people he helped. These blueprints show a hidden complex beneath the mansion, a place that was meant to be a refuge. But it's more than that. It's a treasure trove, hidden artifacts, valuable documents, things that could change everything." Mabel's mind raced as she took in the magnitude of what Jack had just uncovered. "Do you think he left a map to this place?" Jack nodded. "I think this is it. The final piece. The map will lead us to everything your husband was protecting." He turned to Mabel, his eyes locked on hers. "We're not just uncovering his past anymore. We're uncovering a legacy that's been hidden for decades." Mabel took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "Then let's find it. Let's finish what he started." They left the study, heading deeper into the mansion. The air grew colder as they descended into the basement, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. Max was tense, his ears pricked, and his tail straight. It was as if he knew they were getting closer to the heart of the mystery. Jack held the map in his hand, his eyes scanning the room as they entered a hidden passage beneath the mansion. The journey had brought them this far, but the final discovery was still ahead. They were about to find out what lay hidden for so many years, and they were ready for whatever came next. The hidden passage seemed to stretch on endlessly, its walls cold and damp. Jack, Mabel, and Max moved cautiously, the dim light from Jack's flashlight barely illuminating the narrow path ahead. Every step they took echoed in the silence, the sound amplified by the oppressive quiet of the mansion's basement. Jack could feel the tension in the air, the weight of years of secrecy pressing down on them. Max, usually so confident, kept close to Jack's side, his ears perked, his every movement filled with anticipation. Jack's heart raced with every step. They had come so far, uncovered so much, and yet, he knew the most important discovery was still ahead of them. "This passage," Mabel whispered, breaking the silence. "It's like something out of a storybook. It doesn't feel real." Jack nodded, his grip tightening on the flashlight. "It's real, Mabel. Your husband's legacy is down here, waiting for us." They finally reached a heavy iron door at the end of the passage. It was intricately designed, much like the other doors they had seen in the mansion, but this one was different. It felt more significant, as if it were the final barrier between them and the answers they had been searching for. Jack hesitated for a moment, his hand resting on the cold handle. "This is it," he said softly. "Everything has led to this door." Mabel stepped up beside him, her eyes locked on the door. "What if we're not ready for this?" she asked, her voice tinged with doubt. Jack turned to her, his expression steady but filled with empathy. "We're as ready as we'll ever be. And your husband left this for you. For both of us. We don't have a choice now. We have to see it through." With a deep breath, he turned the handle and pushed the door open. The room beyond was unlike anything they had seen before. It was vast, its stone walls lined with shelves and cabinets filled with dusty, forgotten relics. In the center of the room stood a large stone pedestal, its surface covered with intricate carvings. On top of the pedestal was a chest, similar to the ones they had found in the mill and the barn, but this one was different. It was larger, more ornate, and the energy around it felt heavy, almost alive. Jack walked toward it, every step filled with the anticipation of what they might find. As he approached the chest, his hand instinctively reached out, but before he could touch it, a voice echoed through the room. "You shouldn't have come." Mabel gasped, stepping back, her eyes darting around the room. Jack froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried a sense of authority, a warning that sent a chill through him. "Who's there?" Jack called out, his voice steady but filled with suspicion. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, and just as Jack thought the voice had been a figment of his imagination, a figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the room. The person was tall, cloaked in dark clothing, their face hidden beneath a hood. "I warned him," the figure said, their voice now clearer. "I warned him that if he continued, the truth would destroy everything. But he didn't listen." Jack took a step forward, his instincts telling him that this person knew more than they were letting on. "Who are you?" he demanded. The figure remained silent for a moment, then finally spoke again. "I am someone who has watched over this place for years. And now, you've uncovered what was meant to stay hidden. The legacy your husband left behind is not just a gift, it is a curse." Mabel looked at Jack, confusion and fear in her eyes. "What do you mean? What is all of this? What was my husband involved in?" The figure took a slow step forward, their presence commanding attention. "Your husband was part of something much bigger, something that reached far beyond this mansion. He was a keeper of secrets, a protector of knowledge that the world was not ready for. But he was also a key in a much darker game, a game played by those who seek to control what should not be controlled." Jack felt a cold shiver run down his spine as the figure's words sank in. "This isn't just about a network of people, is it?" Jack asked, his voice low. "This is about power, power that can change the course of history." The figure nodded slowly. "Exactly. Your husband was involved in guarding something ancient, something powerful. And now, you've come to take it. But the question is, are you willing to pay the price for it?" Jack took another step toward the chest, his resolve hardening. "We've come this far. We're not backing down now." The figure's eyes flashed with something unreadable. "Very well. But understand this. The truth will change everything. It will shatter the lives you've built, the lives of everyone who has ever known you. Are you prepared for that?" Jack didn't answer immediately. He turned to Mabel, searching her face for any sign of hesitation. But she met his gaze with unwavering determination. "We've come this far together. We'll face whatever comes next," she said quietly. Jack nodded, then turned back to the chest. "Open it," the figure whispered. "But remember, you may not be able to close it again." With that, Jack placed his hands on the chest and slowly opened it. Inside, they found not gold or jewels, but something far more valuable, an ancient artifact, inscribed with symbols that seemed to glow in the dim light of the room. The artifact pulsed with an energy Jack couldn't comprehend, yet he knew that whatever it was, it held the key to everything. The figure's voice broke through the silence once more. "The truth has been unlocked," they said. "Now, you must decide what to do with it." Jack stood there, the weight of the artifact in his hands, knowing that the next step would determine the future, not just for them, but for everyone who had ever been touched by this legacy. Jack stood in the eerie silence of the hidden chamber, the ancient artifact now resting heavily in his hands. The symbols on its surface pulsed with an almost imperceptible glow, their meaning still a mystery. Mabel stood beside him, her eyes wide with disbelief and fear. The figure, cloaked in shadows, had warned them of the consequences, but now that they were holding the artifact, the weight of the decision seemed unbearable. The figure's words echoed in the back of Jack's mind. The truth will change everything. He couldn't help but wonder if they had made the right choice. "What now?" Mabel asked, her voice a mixture of awe and trepidation. Jack's grip tightened on the artifact. He wasn't sure what the next step was, but one thing was certain, there was no turning back. "Now we figure out what this really is," he said, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "This thing, it's not just an object. It's part of something much bigger." The figure watched them silently, as if waiting for them to make their next move. Jack turned toward the figure, the unease in his chest growing. "What exactly is this?" he asked. The figure's eyes gleamed beneath the hood, their voice cold as they spoke. "What you hold is a key to power, to knowledge, to secrets that have been buried for centuries. Your husband was its guardian, the keeper of the knowledge that has been passed down through generations. But it is not just knowledge, it is a dangerous power." Mabel stepped forward, her voice shaking. "But why didn't he tell me? Why didn't he prepare me for this?" The figure tilted their head slightly, as if considering her question. "Your husband's role was never meant to be shared. He knew the cost of this knowledge, the price of revealing its power, and he wanted to protect you from it. But now it is too late to hide." Jack's thoughts raced. "So what happens now? Do we keep it? Do we destroy it?" The figure was silent for a moment before speaking again, their voice almost a whisper. "You cannot destroy what has been created. It has already been set into motion. But how you choose to use it will determine your fate. Use it wisely, or it will consume you, as it has consumed those before you." Jack felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He glanced at Mabel, her expression filled with confusion and fear. We don't know what we're dealing with, he said softly. But we can't just walk away from it either. Mabel nodded, though she still seemed unsure. I never asked for any of this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But if it's the only way to understand what happened to him, what happened to us, then maybe we have no choice. Jack turned the artifact over in his hands, his mind racing. There were so many unanswered questions. What had her husband been protecting? And why had he kept it hidden? We need answers, Jack said, his voice resolute. We have to find out who else is involved in this. Who else knows about the power of the artifact and what it can do? The figure nodded slowly. You will find what you seek, but be warned. There are those who will stop at nothing to control it. And they will come for you once they know what you have. Jack's heart sank. He had expected there to be more danger, but this was different. This was bigger than they could have imagined. We need to go back to the town, Jack said, his mind made up. There has to be someone there who knows more about this, someone who can help us understand the significance of all this. The figure stepped back, disappearing into the shadows from which they had emerged. You are on your own now, they said, their voice distant. The road ahead will not be easy. But remember, the choice you make will define the future. Jack took a deep breath. He knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with danger, but he also knew that there was no turning back now. He turned to Mabel, his eyes meeting hers. We'll figure this out, he said, more to reassure himself than her. We have to. Mabel gave a small nod, though her eyes were still filled with uncertainty. They left the hidden chamber, the weight of the artifact a constant reminder of the power and danger that now lay in their hands. The mansion behind them was silent, but Jack could feel its presence, its history, its secrets, and the burden it placed on them. They made their way back to the truck, the heavy air of the mansion pressing down on them, as if it was unwilling to let them go. The road back to the town seemed longer this time, the world outside the mansion unchanged, but Jack knew that nothing would ever be the same again. They were carrying something that could change everything, something powerful, something dangerous, and they had no idea who they could trust or what they would have to sacrifice to uncover the full truth. But one thing was certain, the truth was out there, waiting for them, and they would stop at nothing to find it. The drive back to town felt like an eternity. The weight of the artifact in Jack's bag seemed to grow heavier with every mile they traveled, the uncertainty of what lay ahead pressing down on him like a physical force. Mabel sat beside him, her eyes focused on the road ahead, her mind clearly somewhere far away. Max lay quietly in the back seat, his usual alertness replaced by an eerie calm. Jack's thoughts raced. He couldn't shake the figure's warning about the artifact's power, about the danger that now followed them. Whoever had been guarding this power had clearly been willing to go to great lengths to protect it. The world they were stepping into was far darker and more complicated than Jack had ever imagined. He couldn't help but wonder who else knew about this secret. Was there anyone they could trust? He glanced at Mabel, catching her gaze for a moment before turning his attention back to the road. What do we do now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Jack admitted, his voice strained. We need more answers. And we need to figure out who else is involved in all of this. Mabel nodded slowly, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. I never thought it would come to this. I thought once we found the truth about my husband's past, we'd be able to move on. But now it feels like we've opened a door to something much bigger. Jack didn't have an answer for her. He didn't know how to stop this, or what the next step would be. But he knew they couldn't just let it end here. As they entered the town, Jack's mind was already working through their options. They could go to the police, but that felt like an immediate dead end. Whoever was involved in this, whoever had been guarding this knowledge, wasn't someone who could be trusted to play by the rules. No, they needed someone on the inside, someone who knew the right people, someone who could help them navigate this dangerous path. As they pulled into the driveway of the small house they had rented, Jack turned to Mabel. We need to find someone who's been in this town long enough to know about the hidden network your husband was a part of. Someone who can tell us more about the artifact and its real purpose. Mabel looked at him, her eyes clouded with worry. But who? We don't exactly have a lot of options. Jack's gaze shifted to the small diner across the street. It was the only place in town that always seemed to be busy, no matter the time of day. He had passed it several times during their stay, and something about it felt familiar. He wasn't sure why, but his gut told him that this diner might hold the answers they were looking for. Let's start there, he said, nodding toward the diner. Mabel hesitated, then nodded in agreement. If anyone knows anything, it might be the people who've been here the longest. They got out of the truck and made their way across the street, the evening chill cutting through the air. As they entered the diner, the warm, greasy smell of fried food hit them immediately, a stark contrast to the cold night outside. The place was bustling with activity, but the energy was different than the quiet, slow pace of the rest of the town. People here seemed to know each other, to have stories they shared, stories that might just hold the key to unlocking the mystery. They slid into a booth near the window, and the waitress, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a quick smile, walked over to take their order. "What can I get for you?" she asked, her tone friendly but guarded. Jack glanced at Mabel, then back at the waitress. "We're looking for someone who's been around here for a while. Someone who might know about the old families in town, the ones who've been involved in things outside the ordinary." The waitress raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. She leaned in a little closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm not sure what you mean, but if you're looking for information, you should talk to Ray. He's been here longer than anyone. He knows all the old stories." Jack exchanged a look with Mabel, and they both nodded. "Where can we find him?" Mabel asked, her voice steady. The waitress smiled faintly, pointing toward the back of the diner. "He's usually here around this time. He sits at the counter, always orders the same thing. Just wait a bit, and you'll see him." They thanked her and waited in silence, Jack's thoughts once again turning to the artifact. Whatever Ray knew, it was their best chance at uncovering the truth behind the power that had been hidden for so long. After a few minutes, the door opened, and in walked an older man, tall and wiry, with a weathered face that spoke of a lifetime spent in the town. He was dressed in a faded denim jacket and a worn hat, his eyes sharp, scanning the room as he made his way to the counter. As he sat down, Jack and Mabel exchanged a look. This was Ray, the man who could help them unlock the mysteries they were chasing. They stood up and approached him. "Ray?" Jack asked, his voice polite but firm. Ray looked up, his sharp eyes appraising them before he nodded slowly. "That's me. What can I do for you?" Jack sat down next to him, keeping his voice low. "We're looking for information about something that's been hidden in this town for a long time. We think you might know more about it." Ray studied him for a long moment before his expression softened slightly. "I've been here a long time. Seen a lot of things. You're asking about something big, something that's not meant to be found." Jack leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have something. An artifact. And we need to know everything you can tell us about it." Ray's eyes widened just slightly, and Jack knew they had touched a nerve. "You found it, did you?" Ray said quietly. "I thought that thing was lost forever. But now, I guess it's your turn to carry the weight of its secrets." Ray's eyes narrowed as Jack and Mabel sat down across from him, the weight of their presence filling the small, dimly lit diner. For a long moment, Ray didn't speak, his weathered face betraying no emotion. His hands, calloused from years of labor, rested on the counter, and his eyes flicked to the artifact that Jack had placed on the table. Jack held his breath, waiting for Ray to speak, unsure if the old man would share what they needed to know. Finally, Ray's voice broke the silence, low and measured. "I thought that thing was lost forever. But now here you are." His words hung in the air, thick with the weight of history. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into." Jack leaned forward, the urgency in his voice clear. "That's why we're here. We need to know everything about it. What it is, who it belongs to, and why it's so important." Ray sighed, shaking his head slowly. "I knew it was only a matter of time before someone found it. Your husband. He was a part of something much bigger than anyone realizes. A network that's been operating in the shadows for generations. They were protectors of something ancient, something dangerous. And that artifact? It's the key to everything." Mabel's heart raced as she listened, her mind struggling to piece together what Ray was saying. "My husband, he was part of this network?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Ray looked at her, his eyes softening with understanding. "He was. But he kept you out of it for a reason. He didn't want you to know what he was involved in. He was protecting you, just like the others before him." Jack's pulse quickened. Protecting her from what? Ray met Jack's gaze, his expression serious. "From the truth. The truth about what that artifact represents. It's not just an object. It's a symbol of power, a power that could change everything." He paused, glancing around the diner, as if making sure no one was listening. The artifact has been passed down through generations, from one keeper to the next. Your husband was its guardian, but there were others before him. People who believed in using its power to control, to shape the future. The network your husband was part of was dedicated to ensuring that this power never fell into the wrong hands. Jack sat back, his mind racing as he tried to process everything. So, this network, this group, they were trying to keep the artifact safe? Ray nodded slowly. Exactly. They knew that if the wrong people got hold of it, they could do unspeakable things. And that's why your husband, he kept it hidden. He kept it from the world, kept it from those who would use it for their own gain. Mabel's eyes widened with realization. But why didn't he tell me? Why keep this from me all these years? Ray sighed again, his expression grim. Because once you know the truth, you can't go back. It changes you. It makes everything you thought you knew about the world seem small and insignificant. And your husband didn't want that for you. He wanted you to live a life free from this burden. Jack glanced at the artifact again, his fingers itching to pick it up. But now that we have it, what do we do with it? Who else knows about it? Ray's gaze hardened. There are people who have been searching for that artifact for a long time. People who don't care about the consequences. People who want to use its power to control everything. And once they find out it's been uncovered, they'll come after you. They'll come after both of you. Jack's heart sank. So we're not safe? Ray shook his head. Not anymore. You've crossed a line, and there's no going back. But you don't have to face this alone. There are people who want to stop those who would misuse the artifact's power. They've been watching, waiting for someone to take up the mantle. Your husband was one of them. And now, it's up to you to decide what happens next. Jack exchanged a look with Mabel, the weight of Ray's words sinking in. What do we do now? Jack asked, his voice quieter now, but still filled with resolve. Ray leaned in, lowering his voice even further. You need to find the others. The ones who have been trying to protect the artifact all these years. They're scattered, hiding, but they know what needs to be done. Find them. And when the time comes, you'll have to make a choice, whether to destroy the artifact or use its power to stop those who would use it for evil. The room seemed to grow colder as Ray's words settled in, the magnitude of what lay ahead becoming more real with each passing second. Jack and Mabel had always known they were dealing with something bigger than themselves. But now it was undeniable. They were caught in the middle of something that could change the course of history. How do we find them? Mabel asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. Ray looked at her, his expression solemn. Follow the path your husband left behind. The clues are there, hidden in plain sight. You'll have to trust your instincts, and be prepared for what's to come. Jack stood, the weight of the artifact pressing into his side. We'll do what we have to do, he said, his voice firm. We'll find them, and we'll stop whoever is after this. Ray watched them both, his eyes lingering on the artifact. Be careful, he said quietly. You're not just protecting an object. You're protecting the future. And some people will do anything to control it. With that, Jack and Mabel left the diner, the artifact between them now a symbol of the dangerous journey they had just begun. They knew they couldn't go back to the way things were, but they also knew that whatever came next, they had to face it together. The road ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, but Jack and Mabel had come too far to turn back. After leaving the diner, they spent the next few days poring over the clues Ray had pointed them to, following the trail her husband had left behind. Every step was fraught with danger, and with each passing moment, the weight of the artifact grew heavier. The world around them seemed to grow darker, more oppressive, as if something, or someone, was watching them at every turn. The fear of the unknown was ever present, but there was no choice but to move forward. Their search led them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place that had once been a thriving hub for local industry, but now lay forgotten, covered in vines and debris. The place was as desolate as it was eerie, the air thick with dust, the silence broken only by the sound of their footsteps. Max trotted ahead of them, his senses alert. They had learned to trust his instincts in the past, and now, more than ever, they needed to rely on them. As they approached the warehouse, Jack turned to Mabel, his voice steady but filled with resolve. This is it. I can feel it. Mabel nodded, her gaze fixed on the darkened entrance. I hope you're right. It feels like we're walking into a trap. Jack's hand tightened around the artifact. We don't have a choice. If we're going to stop whoever is after this, this is where we need to be. They stepped inside, the musty air heavy with the scent of decay. The space was vast, with high ceilings and rows of rusted equipment scattered across the floor. At the far end of the warehouse, a small group of people stood waiting. They were older than Jack had expected, their faces hard, their expressions unreadable. In the center of the group stood a man, his posture commanding, a sharp look in his eyes. He didn't speak immediately, just watched them approach, sizing them up. Jack's pulse quickened as he recognized the tension in the air, the unspoken understanding that this was it, the moment they had been preparing for. "I've been expecting you," the man said finally, his voice cold and clipped. "You have the artifact. I assume you know why you're here." Jack took a step forward, holding the artifact firmly in his hands. "We know enough. We're here to stop this from falling into the wrong hands." The man's lips twisted into a small, knowing smile. "You're too late. The power of the artifact has already begun to awaken. There's no turning back now." Mabel's heart raced as she looked around at the group of individuals standing silently behind him. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and anger. The man stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Jack's. "We are the ones who have been waiting for this moment. The guardians of the artifact's power. And now, with you here, it is time to fulfill its true purpose." Jack took another step, his body tense. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but we're not going to let you use it for your own gain." The man laughed softly, a bitter sound that echoed through the warehouse. "You don't understand. We are the ones who hold the key to the future. The artifact isn't just a relic of the past. It's a tool that will shape everything to come. Those who control it will control the world." Jack's mind raced, but his resolve remained steady. "You're wrong," he said, his voice hard. "This power isn't for one person to control. It's not meant to be used for anyone's gain. It's meant to protect, not dominate." The man's smile faded, and for a brief moment, Jack saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "You think you can stop it? You think you can change the course of history?" Jack stepped closer, the artifact now pulsing with an energy that felt almost alive. "I think we have to try." The tension in the room was palpable as the man stared at Jack, his gaze sharp. For a moment, no one moved. And then, the man slowly nodded. "Very well," he said, his voice colder now. "You'll have to prove it." Without warning, the group behind him advanced, moving in a way that was swift and precise. Jack felt a surge of adrenaline as they closed in, but before they could reach him, Max sprang into action, his growl low and threatening. The group hesitated for a moment, and that's when Jack made his move. He lunged forward, the artifact in his hand glowing brighter with each step, and with a sharp motion, he thrust it toward the man at the center. The energy from the artifact surged, filling the room with an intense, almost blinding light. The man staggered back, his hands raised as if trying to block the overwhelming force. The others around him seemed to falter, unsure of what was happening. For a moment, everything was silent. The light from the artifact flickered and dimmed, and as the glow faded, Jack stood facing the man, the artifact still in his hands, but now it felt lighter, as though its power had been unleashed in a way that no one had anticipated. The man looked at him, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You've done it," he whispered, his voice filled with awe and fear. Jack's chest rose and fell with each breath, his body still tense, but now there was a sense of finality in the air. "We've stopped it," Jack said quietly, his voice resolute. "The artifact doesn't belong to any one person. It's not meant to control, it's meant to protect. And that's what we're going to do." The man said nothing, just stood there, his expression unreadable. Behind him, the others seemed to realize the weight of the situation. The power they had sought to control was no longer something they could use, and with it, their hold on the future was slipping away. The quiet in the warehouse grew heavier, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Finally, the man turned and motioned for his group to leave. "This isn't over," he said quietly, but Jack could hear the uncertainty in his voice. As the group filed out of the warehouse, Jack stood tall, his grip still firm on the artifact. It was over, for now, but the journey they had begun was far from finished. The artifact was no longer a burden. It was a tool for protection, a legacy that had been passed down through generations. Jack and Mabel had proven that the power of the past could be used to shape a better future. And as they stood there, in the quiet aftermath, they both knew that this was just the beginning of something much larger than they had ever imagined. In this gripping tale of mystery, power, and secrets, follow the journey of a veteran and his loyal dog as they uncover hidden truths that could change everything. Starting with a simple discovery, the story explores the incredible events that unfold when a veteran stumbles upon an artifact tied to an ancient and dangerous power. As the story unfolds, the veteran must navigate through a complex web of secrets, legacy, and unexpected alliances, learning that the past is never truly gone. This journey reveals how powerful veteran stories can be when they touch on the hidden corners of history, leading to revelations that shape the future. With every twist and turn, the veteran and his companion uncover more about the artifact, realizing that their actions will determine the fate of not just themselves but those around them. The story also delves into the complexities of family, loyalty, and sacrifice, echoing the timeless theme found in veteran stories. As they uncover deeper secrets, the stakes grow higher, and the choices they make will forever change the course of their lives. In the end, the veteran's journey serves as a powerful reminder of the hidden battles many face, and how sometimes the stories that seem the most personal are the ones that have the most universal impact. This tale is a testament to the power of courage, perseverance, and the unspoken stories that veterans carry with them. The veteran stories shared here are not just about war, but about the internal battles fought for truth, justice, and the greater good.